Hello and welcome back to Sabres of Infinity, Chapter 2. Being the story of the cavalry officer's voyage aboard His Majesty's ship Victorious and the events which did there take place. The first few days of your sea voyage could not possibly be counted as eventful. The hours are parcelled into an endless cycle of drums and bells with only the pendulous back and forth movement of the deck as proof that you are even travelling at all. Elson spends most of his time heaving his guts out over the railing. Kazarosta passes his days either entirely engrossed in silent prayer or face-deep in his books, namely histories of the League of Antar and its component peoples. While it is no doubt good to learn about your enemy, it does not make him any more sociable. The sailors are, to a man, too busy to pay attention to the spurious questionings of a band of turf-loving fops. Of HMS Victorious's company of some 400 men and officers, only the half-company of Grim, stolid Royal Marines pay you and your fellow dragoons any heed. Despite the normal inter-service rivalry which tends to crop up between the Royal Marines and the rest of the army, they are more than happy to show you some guidance when it comes to navigating the seedier aspects of the soldier's trade. What do you do in the first few days of your sea journey? We could either pick up some fighting tips, try to socialize with the common sailors, make conversation with the ship's officers, or brush up on my knowledge of the League of Antar. Well, I think that the smartest in this, it depends on where we're going with it. Brushing up on my knowledge could help me both in battle, as well as if we... I'm not really a war person. I'm already thinking about peace talks in the back of my head and figuring out how to make those happen. So I think brushing up on my knowledge of the League of Antar is probably the best idea. I don't know if it's the best idea, it's the one I like the most, so we're going with that. You manage to borrow a few charts and texts from the Victorious's midshipmen and begin the process of getting to know your enemy. The League of Antar is a vast nation, comprising the whole of the Caligian continent, where northern civilization first arose. While once ruled by an imperial family, the Antari now swear fealty to no monarch, instead being governed by the League Congress, an assembly of several hundred noble lords, each with the right to vote and veto each other's motions in the assembly chamber. You also learn about the Antari way of war, not much removed from the Takaran-descended doctrine the King's army uses, but one which places less emphasis on infantry and more on heavy cavalry, namely, the powerful noble-born church hussars, with their bane-ruined banded mail and arcs of feather and steel lashed to their saddles and made to look like angels' wings. Over the next few days, as you study the history of your enemy, you realize that the Antari are less different than you had thought. They too rebelled against tyrants, fought to unify their lands, and had great men and women whose martyrdoms elevated them to sainthood. It almost seems a pity that your nations, so alike in many ways, must be at war. Almost. In the early morning of your 5th day at sea, you awake to the sounds of drums and the louder, deeper beat of someone frantically pounding at your door. It is one of the Victorious' midshipmen. In a squeaky, terrified voice, he announces that the Victorious has sighted a merchantman flying the White Eagle on red of the League of Antar. The boy, barely 12, tells you that Captain Vulcan has made the decision to break off from the rest of the flotilla and engage the enemy vessel directly. As you walk up onto the quarterdeck, you can hear the Victorious's captain laying out the situation plainly, both to his own lieutenants and your own senior officers. A fat, slow merchant vessel would be an excellent source of prize money. Both the cargo and the heavy capacious hull of the captured vessel itself would be worth a substantial amount of cash once she's sailed back to Tiaran port and sold. However, he notes sourly, no Antari merchant vessel would be so stupid as to travel unescorted, especially this close to the Tiaran naval base at Northern Pillars. He quickly concludes that the vessel is likely a trap, packed to the brim with heavily armed Antari soldiers ready to overwhelm any boarding party. Despite the protests of his own officers, you hear him insist that the risk is worth the reward. He restates his orders to capture the enemy vessel. Within half an hour, you see the Antari vessel for yourself. She is a lubberly, ungainly thing, floating low in the water. As the minutes pass, it becomes clear that the Antari vessel will not escape. Its hull is too fat and the sail plan it carries was obsolete half a century ago. As you draw closer, you can see the deck of the merchant vessel. Her raised forecastle and quarterdeck are overflowing with mobs of Antari sailors, armed with clubs, axes, cutlasses, and the smuttering of muskets. They are hardly a professional fighting force, but it is clear that they plan on defending their ship to the death. A pair of marines rush past you, long-rifled muskets hanging off their backs. Snipers. They grab onto the rigging and begin climbing up the ropes with simian grace. Your eyes follow them as they hoist themselves up to the tops of the mizzen mast, passing the half-dozen marines already in position in the rigging. Suddenly a puff of smoke issues from the form of one of the marines. A sharp crack echoes across the deck. The Antari at the wheel of the other ship clutches his forehead and falls to the deck, his face a ruin. More gunshots ring out, more Antari die. The Antari merchantman is barely a few hundred meters away. From your position on deck, you can see its ragged crew bracing themselves for a boarding action. Even from this distance, you can hear their taunts and prayers in their alien tongue. The thunder of a broadside issues from the Victorious's guns. The Antari vessel is showered in gore as grape shot tears apart those crewmen unlucky enough to be caught in the open. The Victorious's deck, already cleared for action, is filling with the orange-coated bodies of 24 barefooted marines assembled in ranks, muskets in hand. You realize with a start that a few of your fellow dragoons, Elson and Casarosta, are among them. Are rushing in to fill out their ranks. Each new addition is given a warm nod and a slap on the back from the grizzled, salt and pepper-haired marine sergeant leading the boarding party. The lieutenant watching beside you grimaces. Poor stupid fools. Captain Walken said he'd give any volunteer a cut of the prize. Bloody stupid. Men without their sea legs have no place in a boarding action. They'll just get themselves killed. The naval officer has a point. The deck still feels slick and unsteady under your feet. The lieutenant leans forward, squinting as if he cannot believe his own eyes. Saints have mercy, I think one of your friends is trying to convince poor Sergeant Torreston to let him lead the action. You look down to see Casarosta pushing himself to the head of the formation, towards the NCO readying to board. The lieutenant's frustration and shock are palpable. No matter how veteran the Victorious' marine sergeant, he would have no choice but to give way to a commissioned officer, no matter how junior. Including you, in fact, if you had a mind to lead yourself. You decide to... shouldn't get in the way, reads a chain. Yeah, we're trying to talk the others out of it. I don't think they will follow my lead and not get involved, but we're going to have to at least try. You try to speak to some of your fellow dragoons, but their eagerness and bloodlust have gotten the better of them. Yep, I thought so. When you see the ready expressions on their faces, you cannot bring yourself to stop them. You slink away below decks before either Elson or Casarosta can see you. You wait out the battle alone in your cabin. The ship shakes back and forth with the sound of cannon fire. Suddenly a massive explosion shakes through the frigate's hull, almost rocking you off your feet. After that, there is a moment of silence before the clamour of swords and musketry starts up again. After a few minutes more, the sound of fighting dies down. Half an hour later, the door to your cabin slams open. It is Cornet Elson, sporting a gash on his forearm and a great jubilant grin. Victory, dear fellow. The Antari gave us a scare with that banefire trap of theirs. Downed a good few of our marines too, but we pressed on. The ship is ours. Tiara prevails. A few hours later, a midshipman appears at the door to summon Elson and Casarosta to a debriefing in the captain's wardroom. An hour and a half later, Elson returns, his face a blank mask. He explains that Captain Walken is holding Casarosta personally responsible for the death of his men. Well, that's what he gets. Poor fellow, he mutters in a tone composed half of pity and half of genuine sympathy. He couldn't detect the banefire trap the Antari set in time. Captain Walken blames Casarosta for it, and the men he has lost because of it. Now Montes is somewhere berating him for it. Casarosta isn't suited for command. His commonest blood all but ensures it, but even I think this is a bit harsh. Banefire trap? Damned frightful thing, dear fellow. The Antari must have had a banecaster aboard that ship. As soon as we set foot, he let loose a wall of banefire that nearly wiped us all out. Thankfully, Casarosta had the sense to order me to watch for such tricks before we went in. I caught it early enough to save most of the boarding party, but we lost a few men in the blast. Elson pauses for a bit, as if he's not quite sure whether to be proud or saddened. As we were picking ourselves off the deck, the Antari counterattacked. Not sailors, mind you, but real soldiers in armor. Saints be thanked the bastards didn't have their sea legs yet, so we were able to best them with the help of Captain Walken's marines. Soon after, Casarosta returns. Drained of emotion, he conveys the news that he has been officially reprimanded, just a step away from being cashiered. He pauses for a moment, as if waiting for one of you to say something. I don't really have anything to say. You and Elson stare at each other for a moment, but neither of you seem to have anything to say to each other. Exhausted, you return to sleep. The Victorious' prize ship and Lieutenant Biggin's prize crew leave at dawn. The next few days are uneventful. The wind is good and the weather is calm. You spend the time as you did before, aimlessly speaking with sailors, officers, and your fellow dragoons. After another week, the lookout finally announces that he has spotted the bleak grey of the Antari coast on the horizon. What follows is an interminable period of waiting. Having reached the Antari coast and rendezvoused with the rest of the squadron, the Victorious must now wait for the wind to change enough for it to complete the last stretch of its journey. Sailing west along the coast to reach the Tierran-held port of Norindia, where you and the rest of your regiment are to disembark and make final preparations before proceeding to the front. For the next week and a half you wait with nothing to do besides fish, read, and indulge in idle conversation. On the 10th day of waiting, the lookout reports a ship approaching from the south. A small, sleek vessel flying the Griffin and Tower of Tierra. The vessel is a courier, sent directly from the naval base at Northern Pillars. Aboard are dispatches from Grenadier Square for Captain Montes, as well as orders for Captain Walken. In addition, the vessel brings news that the Antari merchantman the Victorious had captured has already been bought out. As a result, the prize money due to the ship's crew and members of the boarding party is duly doled out. As the others receive your prize money, you can't help but feel that you too would be partaking in the good fortune of your fellow officers if you had only joined in. Yes, or we'd be dead. One of the two. The next day, the wind changes and the squadron continues on its way. 2 days later, you finally make landfall on Antari soil. Next chapter. By the way, now that we're here, I know that it says, should you die in the next chapter, you may return to this point in time. The question I have for you now is, do we do that if it happens? Because we've got two options, basically. We can either play until we die, make this realistic in a sense, or we can basically continue through, even if we die, finishing the story itself. And I kind of want to know from you which you guys would prefer me doing. I'm doing this pretty early so that I've got a bit of leeway in being able to record more episodes and hopefully not die in the next chapter, because that would be a bit bad. But yeah, let me know what you want or what you would prefer, or if you don't care, then I don't know. I don't even know which would I prefer. I mean, I kind of like the idea of not just going back and having another go at it. But at the same time, I mean, it kind of depends on how interested I am in the story that follows. If I'm like, come on, I want to know more about this, then I might just go back in and continue either way. But yeah, as I said, let me know. And I'll see you guys in the next episode.